Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. Glad you could join me. Hope you learned something. Enjoy the camaraderie that we express for each other and the sport, the habitat, the birds, and particularly the dogs. We're going to get deep into that one with my, it's a wonder I haven't had him on the podcast before. Phil Swain is well known in the world of the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association as a member from way back, also a hunt test judge, avid wild bird hunter, does his own share of dog training. We're going to learn all about those things and who knows what else, because Phil and I generally are making small talk as we're trailing behind a dog undergoing a test. So this will be my first chance to go deep into the weeds with Phil Swain, talking versatile hunting dogs and wild bird hunting. Also, we'll get to the Upland Nation Glossary. We're on the letter H, and I've got a chance for you to win a shotgun in our hero contest from Audio Cardio. It's all made possible by Roughland Performance Kennels, Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer Shotguns, Dr. Tim's Natural Performance Dog Food, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, and audiocardio.com. How's your training season going? It's also a good time to get started on your shooting. I just got some more ammo. Thank you, Ryan, for working hard at finding ammo for me, especially for that 28 gauge. Haven't gotten deep into that one yet this season, but I am working hard with Flick on steady to wing shot and fall, which seems to be the sticking point for almost everybody these days. I told you last week we were to the point where I'm flying a covey of homing pigeons, hopefully to keep him steady on big bunches, and then hopefully on walking around birds, because I'm just letting him out basically out of a milk crate, which works really well sometimes. I had to cobble it all together, and as a music major, mechanical stuff is a little bit tough for me, but if it's just a milk crate, a wooden lid, and a length of rope, even I can figure it out. So we're having a good time with that, and he is making a little progress. And then, of course, that's when the hawks show up. Yeah, we live right on the edge of a national forest, so we've got our share of accipiters and buteos, including Cooper's hawks and redtails. And around here, the redtails don't mind taking a flying bird every once in a while instead of a rodent. So we're up against it in that regard. So I fly my birds very infrequently, and maybe you can relate to that as well. Anyway, like George Hickok said, no birds, no bird dog. Hey, I got a lot more to talk about, including your insights on why you would not take a newcomer hunting. That's all coming up after we talk to Phil Swain about wild birds and versatile hunting dogs. We are brought to you in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, crafted at the highest caliber. Sign up for the mailing list and you'll get first notice of the very rare sales and also the new products coming down the pike. Check out the videos. No matter what kind of shotgun you own, Fred Bowman, everybody at sageandbreaker.com has a video for you. You never know. You might just learn something. I did. And if you're looking for a new gun to clean, LegacySports.com is where you shop the entire line of pointer shotguns, semi-automatics, over and unders, youth guns, high-end to entry-level, target, field guns, and most of them can be ordered in that Cerakote finish, 3 different colors, Cerakote finish. They look cool. They really caught the eye of everybody at Pheasant Fest, and boy, did I have a good time showing those off to everybody. Learn more about pointer shotguns at LegacySports.com. Well, like I said in the introduction, I cannot believe it took this long to get him on the podcast. I'm grateful he is. He's over there on the other side of the hill from me, but I usually see him as we're both trundling around a NAVHDA hunting test of one way, shape, or form. Phil Swain, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you. I'm really honored that you have invited me on, and I appreciate it. And may I say, just in starting out, that your affinity for people and ability to relate to people is particularly well related, I think, in the article that you wrote in the March-April issue this year of the Pointing Dog Journal, sharing advice from people and so forth. That's a really good article, and it's folksy and down to earth and just good advice. So thanks for that, Scott.
Well, I appreciate that, Phil, and I hope Jake Smith is listening right now. He's the editor of that magazine. In fact, he owes me money right now. So
yeah, there you go.
And another piece coming up, which I think will be just as fun. You're very kind, and one of that's the reason you and I are here today, though, as well. We each feel the need to share some information with some people sometimes, and here's an opportunity for both of us to do that. But let's start with the really important stuff. How did your last hunting season go?
It was pretty sparse, to tell you the truth, with the pandemic and everything. Normally in my hunting season, I try to get over into the Owyhees, and so that requires me to be out for at least 3 or 4 days, because it's a long drive for me to get over to eastern Oregon, and so that means that I'm staying in a motel and eating in restaurants. So I was kind of reluctant to do that this last year. So a lot of my hunting was pay-to-hunt down at Lucky Mute Valley Pheasants, and towards the end of the season, I went with a good friend of mine, and we were over by Heppner, and I have also been bothered by my knees, and so I was conservative in that regard. So we were over in Heppner and chukar hunting, and the first day went okay, and then the second day we decided to reach out a little bit more, and I got into some mountain climbing, which is part of chukar hunting. And my knee was hurting a little bit as I climbed the mountain. And when I got up on top of this mountain, I thought, man, this is really painful. And I started down a little bit, and I was just getting shooting pain from the knee. And I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get down.
Wow.
I may have to sit down and slide down this mountain. So my chukar hunting season this last year was sparse. I usually try to travel to the Owyhees. I go to the Dakotas or to northeastern Montana, or even down to Arizona or New Mexico to hunt quail down there. But with COVID and my knee this year was not the year for that. It's tough getting older, Scott. I was going to say, so I'm told, but I'm living it every day now. And speaking of knees, I'm managing them intensely for that very reason. I was up in that country twice this past season. And while it's not the worst climbing, it's in the top 10 over there. Yeah. So I know of what you speak. The other thing was, if this was a year for bad knees, if last season was a season for bad knees, it was the right one, because, the drought made for sparse cover, made for small hatches, made for scattered birds. I've told other people before, I hunted less. I went to fewer states. I shot fewer birds, but it was still a pretty good season, and part of it was right up there. Did you see any Hungarian partridge when you were up there in that Heppner area? I did not. I did not.
That was
most. Part of that may have been that my range was a little bit limited in getting around, because I was being very careful. Yeah,
well, I don't blame you, because once you're up on top, you got the worst of it's to come.
It took me over an hour. I ended up back down on a road after getting down that mountain, and my GPS said I was about a mile from the truck, and it took me well over an hour to cover that mile back to the truck.
Ow, I'm hurting already just hearing that. I'll never forget. This has been the reminder to me over the years for number one, hunting with a partner. Number two, bringing a really serious survival kit, no matter where you are. I was up in some mountains in southeast Oregon, a little bit west of where you like to go, and it was a 2-foot drop off of a boulder. I was scouting off a boulder, and I jumped off the boulder and landed not quite right on a couple smaller rocks. And I thought, that could have been a broken leg. And here I am in the darkest place in the lower 48. Nobody knows where I am.
Yeah.
That's another argument for one of those spot locator beacons, which everybody, it's the truth. I never leave the truck without it. So
I don't either. I have one of those, and my wife is adamant. And one of the things that I've also done from time to time is I will leave a map in the truck with. I carry 2 walkie-talkies, and I will leave one of the walkie-talkies in the truck and a map and some notes about where I'm intending to go, and then I carry the other walkie-talkie. So in addition to my spot.
I love it. That's a great idea. I'm going to make a note of that. And that's after I give one of my buddies a walkie-talkie so that he can find me once in a while. So good.
Yeah, I wish the Garmin GPS that I use with my dogs had the radio in it.
Yeah.
You can share positions with a hunting partner, but it would just be nice to have that walkie-talkie incorporated in that Garmin Alpha GPS. But you mentioned. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No, you. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
You mentioned carrying a survival kit, and I learned that lesson really the hard way, and sometimes, especially chukar hunting, guys will laugh at me because my vest with nothing in it but a few shells easily adds 5 pounds to the weight that I'm carrying. But several years ago, I was hunting grouse in Sawyer County, Wisconsin, up out of Park Falls, which is reputed to be the grouse hunting capital of the world. And I was hunting with a friend of mine, and we went into on a trail up there hunting grouse, and it was one of those days where the clouds were down in the treetops. There wasn't any sun. It was kind of drizzling and wet, and just the kind of weather that only a dumb hunter would go out in. But anyway, we went out late in the afternoon, and we're following a trail, and the grouse hunting was actually pretty good, but it was pretty wet. And we got in there, and 2 things happened. It began to get dark, and then the trail ended, and it got more and more swampy. And the darker it got, the more swampy it got, and pretty soon we were climbing over deadfalls, and we were in water that was knee deep and sometimes thigh deep.
Oh,
and,
my.
It got so dark, like I say, the clouds were down in the top of the tree, so there wasn't any moon nor stars, and the sun was gone. And so we pressed on, and my buddy was behind me, and he said, "I think you're taking us in circles." And I said, "Well, okay, why don't you get in front?" So anyway, we finally got up on kind of a cedar stump where we were up out of the water, and he said, "I think I can walk us out of here." Our plan was there were 2 roads, the one that we had come in on and started a path, following a path off that road, and it was about 4 or 5 miles across to another road. And that had been our plan, was to go across to that other road. Well, to make a long story short, I had surgery on my other knee for a meniscus about, I don't know, 7 or 8 months before. So, in the water and climbing over deadfalls, in my Navy training, survival and going through SEER school prior to going to Vietnam and all that stuff, said, when you're lost, just sit down and wait, and so I told my buddy, I said, I'm going to just stay here. I managed to get up on a log where I was up out of the water. The dogs were tired, and survival kit was my theme going into this. I was not carrying any extra water. I was not carrying any snacks. I was not carrying a survival blanket. I was not carrying any of that stuff. Anyway, about midnight, one of the other guys that we had been hunting with, I guess, finally figured out that we weren't going to walk out of the woods, and he went and got the Sawyer County Sheriff, and what they do when they get hunters lost in those woods up there, which apparently is not uncommon, is they set up klaxons, one on one road and one on the road that we intended to go to. And like I say, we'd been shooting grouse, so I was low on ammunition, and, we had no matches and none of that stuff. Anyway,
wow.
Finally my buddy said, I think I can walk out of here. And he said, I'm going to do that. Your knee's hurting, so you stay here, and I'll come back and get you. And by golly, that's what he did. The Sawyer County Sheriff's Department, long may they live, has a search and rescue guy. It's one guy and a deputy sheriff, and they came in, and they interviewed the hunting partner that had gone and gotten them, and they said, where did these guys go in? Where do they intend to go? What kind of shape are they in? What kind of woodsmen are they, et cetera, et cetera. And the guy, the search and rescue guy, said, okay, well, they're within about 200 yards of this spot.
Oh, you're kidding me.
And so my hunting partner who was with me walked out and actually met those guys a couple miles from where I was, and they turned around, and that search and rescue guy, using a compass and a flashlight, walked back in and found me.
Wow.
So we stepped out on the road that we had intended to step out on about 6:30 the next morning. So
Ooh.
After that experience, Scott, I always carry a survival kit.
Well, there is the lesson for everybody, and I couldn't have done it better. And I was the survival kit guy for our Boy Scout troop as an assistant scoutmaster. I wish I could have told that. I will tell that story to everybody from now on. And you're absolutely right. You did everything virtually everything wrong.
Yep.
But you learned from it, and that's good. And I'm glad you're here to tell about it because you're helping somebody else as well. Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. That's Phil Swain with the Adventure Stories. I'm Scott Linden, the host. Phil, let's hit a lighter note here. Tell me about your dogs these days. I know you have a young one. We're going to talk about training and that sort of thing. So who else is in your string these days?
Well, I have 4 German short hairs. I have an older short hair, and when I got him, I've been involved in NAVHDA since the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association since the 70's. And, periodically I would test dogs, but for me it's always been about hunting, not so much about testing. And so I got this dog, and he was a pretty nice dog, and he was a good hunting dog. But I never invested the amount of training time and so forth. I just figured, well, he's a good dog, he'll get it. And so he's now 12 going on 13, and I finally did get him through a NAVHDA utility test. But he's always been a management project because in terms of desire on a scale of 1 to 10, he's about a 12. So now he's old and he's kind of arthritic, and I have to be careful when I run him. And then I've got another male who's now about 7, and he, I went the opposite way with him. I invested a lot of time and effort in the training for him, and he is superb. As a matter of fact, he's good enough that on occasion I've guided with him down at Lucky Mute Valley Pheasants because I could rely on him to hold points and hold the birds. And then I was so impressed with him and thought he was such a good dog that I got a good friend of mine named Jeff Merriman to use his bitch, and so we bred my male, whose name is Skipper, and Jeff's dog, Dakota, and so we got a litter of puppies out of that, and so I have one of the puppies from that litter, and staying with my Navy lineage, that dog is named Captain, and she's 18 months now, and I'm hoping to run her in a utility test in August. And she's everything that I hope she would be. And so, that being said, my ability as a trainer is being tested. The good news is that my wife is a much better and much smarter trainer than I am. And while I have been fooling with my knee, she has been working with this young female, and so she's coming along, so I have high hopes.
Well, you just discovered the secret sauce there, and I got to dig into that a little bit. Number one, first off, I agree. I think the more dogs we have, the better trainers we become, or is it that we pick better dogs? I'm not sure. But how the heck did you get your wife involved in this whole game, and especially the training side of things?
My wife and I have been married for 53 years, and her dad was with the Forest Service, was a ranger with the Forest Service, so she was raised in the woods, and she's just, she's one of those people that she's always able to do the thing of walk a mile in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
She's very empathetic, and while she is a totally independent and smart person, she's very supportive of me. And so it's just been something that we just always been together. And part of that may be her heritage, because she was raised in the woods, not necessarily with dogs, but certainly with big game hunting and fishing and so forth. And her mom and dad were very involved in that. And so, when we decided years ago, I was stationed in Brunswick, Maine, and one of my squadron mates had Irish setters, and I didn't know anything about dogs. And I thought Irish setters were hunting dogs, and nowadays some of them are. But back then, I just thought they were beautiful dogs and hunting dogs. So anyway, we got a pup from my squadron mate, and we had some real adventures for years and years and years. He was the only Irish setter that had ever qualified in a NAVHDA utility test.
Oh my gosh, that is remarkable. Maybe even to this day, now that I think about it. But congratulations! I mean, that in itself is a big step. Yeah, I got to start working on my wife as well. She tolerates me once in a while because she just loves watching the dog. But it's just like when I make TV shows. No, she doesn't go. It's too intense for her, because that's the way I get when there's cameras in front of me. We've talked around it a whole bunch, and I think I know your answer, but for the record, what is it you love most about bird hunting?
I like watching the dogs. For me, there's no point in going if I don't, there are a lot of, I've looked at a lot of different pay-to-hunt places, hunting preserves across the Dakotas and so forth, and but they have their dogs that they want you to use.
Yeah.
And for me, there's no point in going if I just like watching the dogs. In the article that you wrote in the Pointing Dog Journal that I referred to, you talk about walking along and just watching the dog, and just in a very simple surrounding. Like I go down to St. Louis Pond, where there's a big dog training area down by Woodburn.
I know it well. I think that was actually the first natural ability test I ever did, was right there.
Well, sometimes I'll just be walking behind my dogs, and I'll just be, praying as I walk along, thanking the Lord that I can be out there doing that and just enjoying the ambiance. And I thought you really hit that note in your article. I thought that was great, Scott.
Well, thank you. And you're of like mind with me and probably 99.9% of the people who will hear this interview. So it really is all about that kind of stuff and a whole, the rest of it as well. I'm constantly amazed that number 2 on the list when I ask this every year in my survey is camaraderie, fellowship, friends and family. That last season for me, that was the most prevalent aspect that I finally was able to enumerate. Had lots of that. In fact, got off the phone yesterday from one of the guys that I got to know way better as a result of last year and the serendipity that I was exposed to a whole bunch of times out there. Hey, we're just getting warmed up around here on the Upland Nation podcast. Phil is a long-time NAVHDA judge, as well as a wild bird hunter and a trainer, of course. We're going to talk about all of those things and how they might benefit you, whether it is a young dog or you're like me trying to polish up a dog that, like Phil's, has a lot of drive and needs I guess I'll call it a tight lead once in a while. So stick around for that and a few other things, including our Upland Nation Glossary. We're down to the letter H. Wow. What am I going to do? Double back when I get to Z? And the proverbial question, you not taking any newcomers hunting? Why the heck not? I'll have your answers to that question and a whole bunch more with Phil Swain coming up in just a minute. Phil, relax for a moment while I take care of a little business, including speaking on behalf of audiocardio.com. And if you didn't hear that, let me just repeat it, audiocardio.com. It's a workout for your ears. You may not think your ears have been affected by all that shooting, but believe me, they have. And now there is a way to fix that to at least some degree. We call it sound therapy. You strengthen your hearing. It's an app. You just plug your earbuds into your phone and you listen. You can do everything else you need to do. Just listen subconsciously as you're going about your business. It's physical therapy for your ears. 14-day free trial. Just go get the app. It's free. Watch the 2-minute video at audiocardio. What did I say? Watch the 2-minute video at audiocardio.com. It's much more clear than my speech. And if you like the free trial, you can get that app for as little as $8.33 a month. Strengthen your hearing with audiocardio.com. So you can hear your dog whining in the Roughland kennel. No, they just don't do that. They love their kennels. Roughlandkennels.com. New colors, handles included with every kennel these days. Easy to move them. They support pheasants forever. They've built all new molds for all of their gear, which also has enabled them to make new gear, a wide variety of accessories at roughlandkennels.com. Rough is spelled just like Flick would spell it, R-U-F-F, landkennels.com. All the gear you have now from Roughland Kennels will integrate seamlessly with the new stuff. So buy yourself some water storage, gear storage, a fan, you name it, and it'll all work with your old stuff as well. And we are back with Phil Swain, my buddy, fellow hunt test participant. We have walked more than a mile in each other's shoes. I'm not a judge, but I've been trailing you once in a while as a gunner or probably some other troublemaker. Phil, thank you on behalf of all NAVHDA members who've ever taken a hunt test anywhere in the entire galaxy for your hard work. I don't think everybody realizes this is all volunteer work, isn't it?
Yep, it sure is.
Why would you want to spend so many weekends, and not only so many weekends, so many miles in the course of a day, I don't even want to guess how many miles. You've probably figured it out. Tell us about a NAVHDA test and how much walking you do.
Typically, in a NAVHDA test, in a natural ability test, you're walking somewhere between 10 and 12 miles because you can have a maximum of 10 natural ability dogs in a test. And so, that's just the mileage that you put on. In a utility test, it's a little bit less, maybe 8 to 10 miles. But yeah, it can be physically pretty demanding. And you do that for 3 days, regardless of the weather usually. So it can be really hot or raining, and so it can be challenging.
And we've both been in the really hot and the raining. The biggest, best, most memorable washout I had literally was over there by Silverton. Maybe you were there. Maybe you were sympathetic, but it rained all night. And in fact, I'll never forget. In fact, you were judging my young dog at the time because the first bird that got up in the field portion of that test flew about a foot. And then It was Katie barred the door. It took us a half hour to get what was left of that bird out of his mouth before we were set off to the next aspect of the test. And thank you for not laughing out loud at me during that test. But
well, that's because we've all been there.
We have, haven't we? What is the biggest? What is the bigger takeaways you find, whether it's training tips for yourself or other observations about dogs or dog handlers? What's your takeaway from a NAVHDA test?
I guess two things. That I think I mentioned that I started with an Irish setter, and I was in Brunswick, Maine at the time. That was still a Naval Air Station at that time, and from there I went down to I was assigned in Washington D.C., and so I was associated with the Potomac chapter, and so I think the people. I've just met some really, really great people. And again, I keep referring to your article in the Pointing Dog Journal, but where you say that if somebody says that they've learned everything they know and haven't had help and advice, they're lying. And that certainly is my case. I've had a lot of help, a lot of coaching along the way, and I've had NAVHDA people who have just demonstrated an incredible amount of patience and tolerance of me because, I tend to be kind of a type A personality. And, people have just, put up with that. And I guess I don't know, because of the dogs, they've been able to kind of pull me through and help me out a lot. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, I want to have the best dog that I can. And there are a lot of different venues for pursuing that with a dog. But one of the things that I like about NAVHDA is that you are encouraged to train your own dog. And again, back to the people will help you learn how to do that. And sometimes the advice is, I don't need to hear that from you, but, and I do that with my wife sometimes. And after I get through being mad at what she's told me, I step back and try what she says, and she's usually right. And so, I guess the teamwork in building a better dog, which means I get a lot better hunt because I'm not out there screaming and yelling and blowing the whistle all the time at my dog. I have a dog that is engaged with me and working with me. So I guess those two things, the people and having a better dog are big pluses for me.
And it wasn't at that test, but a subsequent test down the road with another dog for me, maybe where I actually passed. Somebody said something very similar. You remember Dick Sinclair?
Yeah, sure.
Well, he said something at the end of a test. If you're not familiar, listeners, with NAVHDA, one of the things that happens is at the end of the day, everybody gathers around and the judges read the scores of every dog. And so it's kind of come to Jesus time for a lot of people for a lot of good reasons, but it's a little bit stressful for people who haven't, faced a lot of that kind of thing before. Dick said before he read any of the scores one day, he said something like, anybody who goes through this testing process and any dog that passes any of these tests is likely going to be the best dog in the field on any given day, no matter where you are and who you're with. And he's absolutely true. And part of it is because we learn from each other. Part of it is the test is so well structured to create good hunting dogs. Would you amplify on that part just a little bit? We all know what a field trial looks like or sounds like, but the NAVHDA test does some things that maybe aren't covered in other places, are they?
No, I don't. I think that's true. One of the things that lends itself to what you just said is that it's not competitive. One dog is not competing against another dog, and so regardless of the dog's breed or age, the dog is competing against a standard, and that's why becoming a judge in NAVHDA is a fairly challenging prospect. It's a minimum of 2 years apprenticing to learn how to define the standard in accordance with the NAVHDA aims and rules. And so the dog competes against the standard. So you can have all the dogs that get the maximum score, or you can have none of the dogs get the maximum score. So you don't have winners and losers, so to speak, other than an individual perception. So, and the test is oriented to the extent that we're able to. I mean, obviously it is a test, and so some of it is a little bit synthetic and manufactured, but it's oriented towards a hunting environment. So if you think about just the field search portion of the test, there are 7 things that are evaluated during the field search, and that, of course, is the dog's search, its use of nose, its desire, its cooperation, its pointing, the way that it covers the ground. So things that you would want your dog to be doing and you would want evaluated for a hunting scenario. So that, and since these are supposed to be versatile dogs, there also is a water portion of the test because we want to evaluate the dog's affinity for water. And there's also a tracking portion. And the tracking portion, ultimately it's all about conservation of game, because when we're hunting, we don't want to lose a bird that has maybe been, if you shoot like I do, where you wingtip a bird and knock it down, you want a dog that will go out and track that bird and recover it so that the bird is not wasted. And so there's a tracking component in the natural ability test, and that's all in the hunting context.
And on top of the hunting context, there's also a significant amount of what I will call practical obedience work as well. Everything from walking at heel through basically an obstacle course to in the more advanced, the older dog tests, remaining still at the blind and going all the way to the invitational test where they need to honor another dog's point, for example. All of those things and more are covered. By the way, if you're interested in NAVHDA training and NAVHDA testing, everybody, I did thanks to the help of a lot of people, including my friends at Ugly Dog Hunting, we were able to make an episode of Wing Shooting USA at the 2015 NAVHDA Invitational Test. Go to the YouTube channel, Scott Linden Outdoors, and take a look at that. That is the World Series of dog training. I can't describe it any better way than that. Shows you all of those things that we've been talking about in the NAVHDA world, but let's get relevant to a lot of us who are right now looking at a 12-week-old or an 18-week-old bundle of fur that when it's not peeing on the floor, it's trying to learn all about how to become a better hunting dog. Phil, what are some of the most important things we need to do with a young dog early on in their career?
One of the things that I think is extremely important to have the dog engaged with you.
Yeah.
And by that I mean when you walk into the yard, when you go to the kennel, when you walk into the room, for that dog you become the most important thing around. And I think you do that by I am a great fan of positive-based training. So, and I use treats a lot. And so if I have the dog, I live in the city, so I don't have a big expanse of land to train on. But I do have a green space right behind my house. So I can take my dog out there, that puppy. I can have that puppy on a lead, and I can let the dog, maybe the lead is 10 or 15 feet long, and I can let that puppy run out a little bit and run around, and then I will very happily run around and call the dog's name and clap my hands. And when that dog comes into me, they get a little treat. And I'm just spending time with the dog and getting the dog engaged with me. I don't need to do a whole bunch of training at that young age. What I'm doing is getting the dog to recognize its name and getting the dog to recognize that when it comes into me, it gets a reward. That's a good thing. So anyway, that would be the basic, I think. There is a I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but there is a guy named Michael Ellis, and Michael is he's on Learberg.com, and I've watched. He primarily trains protection dogs. And a few years ago, my sister-in-law lives down in New Mexico, and she was working with a professional trainer, and they were training Malinois dogs for protection. And he's a retired eye surgeon. He sold his practice in North Carolina and came to New Mexico and bought a ranch. And so he's training protection dogs for police departments and so forth. And so I was watching the training, and if you've watched any of the obedience with a protection dog, their level of obedience compared to what we see in our hunting dogs, it's like we're the Mickey Mouse Club, and they're the pros. Because those dogs can be dangerous, And you think about 3,000 pounds of pressure in a bite, and for our dogs, the prey drive for the bird is what sparks those dogs.
Yeah.
For a protection dog, the prey drive is to the bite. You watch those dogs when they're biting, and their tails are wagging, their ears are up, their eyes are bright. So anyway, I asked this guy. I said. Well, he asked me, he said, how do you train your dog? Do you ever use treats? And at that time I said, I don't do any of that stuff. I might pull a treat out of my pocket thinking it was a shotgun shell and stick it in my bag. And he just kind of went, oh, okay. But most of his training was started using treats and building engagement with the dog.
Yeah.
And so I learned from him. And so then there's a guy here in the local area named Ron Garrison. And Ron turned me on to Michael Ellis and the type of training that he does, which is a reward-based training. So I started watching some of his videos. And then I got, again, back to your article and the points out more help from people. I wrote an article on training and sent it to the president of our local NAVHDA chapter, Howard Meyer, and he said, what we don't do enough with our dogs is praise. And so I rewrote the article, and, that praise and being excited, as men sometimes we're really reluctant to go, oh, good dog, you're doing so well, wow, and we don't do that. And the dogs really respond to that. So anyway,
yeah.
That's a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but it's absolutely spot on. And I'll give you two examples. First is I was watching a guy work some cow dogs over the weekend. And he's all about the same thing. And the interesting part about that was the young dog, he had some 13-week-old border collies, and he turned them loose in a pen of sheep. And he did exactly what if I went up to him afterwards, I said, this is how we introduce young dogs to birds. We put them out, we let them get real excited, and then that's okay for a while. Now let's go back to bonding again. You understand what the goal is there, whether it's the bite, the birds, the sheep, it doesn't matter. That's number one. Treats, absolutely, he's all over that. But you mentioned something that is absolutely true, and that is praise. Praise, of course, is a reward as well, and especially when you deliver it in that way. And I'll just say it one more time for the record, a very well-known versatile dog trainer who competes and judges over there in Germany, where they figured out this stuff the first time around. She and her fellow female dog handlers are probably getting the best work I've ever seen out of hard-headed Deutsch Drahtars, because they all talk like this when they're working with their adult dogs too. And
yep.
I think there's something to that. And I wish I have one regret. By the way, you're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. That's Phil Swain, expert in so many worlds, and we haven't even gotten to tuba playing yet. But before Ed Bailey passed, and thank you, Ed, I know you're up there still helping people. I wanted to ask him about tone of voice and how other animals express that. This guy was a master at that. He was a behaviorist at the University of Guelph, and he was helpful to me in many regards. Have you noticed the same thing? Is it really about tone of voice? Is that what gets those dogs so psyched? Even the protection dogs?
I often remark that I think God had a lot of fun when he made dogs, because they read us so well. If you're anxious or apprehensive or nervous, the dogs can smell that. If you do any research into how a dog's nose works, it's a fascinating research. But in addition to that, they read your body language. So if you know that, if you know that they can be used to diagnose kidney disease or diabetes or all of those kinds of things because of their nose sensitivity, and if you know that you can watch them read your body language, why would you think that they would not respond to your voice?
Yeah.
And your tone of voice? And I can see this with my young puppy. She's 18 months old, and I had her out at St. Louis Ponds yesterday. I took her out Sunday afternoon after church, and we were out with my wife, and it was not a good day for me. There were a lot of people out there, and I was angry because everybody was taking up my space. Anyway, on Sunday afternoon during the training, I was just really intense with her, and her whole performance was shadowed by that. Yesterday, I took her out, and I remembered, hey, she's 18 months old. Just lighten up. Just enjoy the run. Just let her, And so my body language was different. My tone of voice was different, and her performance was totally different. So, yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I'll never forget the one natural ability test where me and probably Buddy at the time actually got 112 points. That's the highest score. And it was a revelation like that the day before. Overtrain, go out, going to train where the test is so that you can overtrain some more. And then maybe I hit a branch as I was walking under a tree or something, but all of a sudden I realized it's too late. Now it's time to have to have fun. convey that to the dog, and sure enough, it worked. And it's true in hunting situations, training situations, and all of that bonding that takes place as a result of it. I mean, I just wrote a piece for somebody else on how, you don't bond with a dog when you're mad at it. In fact, you're building a barrier. So create positive opportunities to be positive and leverage those. Am I making any sense?
It makes sense to me. I'm right in line with you. That's absolutely right. One of the things that I encountered, we were talking about treats, and since we're talking about voice inflection and body language, one of the questions that I asked Dr. Ed Miller when I was down in New Mexico, I said, well, how do you transition from treats as a reward to rewarding the dog when you're not going to use treats or you don't have treats? And he demonstrated that with body language and voice. Yeah. And so that's how you transition from treats, because eventually you're not going to, and in a NAVHDA test, you can't use treats. So at some point in your training, you have to transition, and that's the bonding with your dog that you get to, where the dog is engaged with you, and that dog responds to you, to your voice, and to your body language, and doesn't need a treat because the praise is the treat.
There you go. And that praise can be physical, verbal, and everything in between.
Should be both.
Talking young dogs again, and so many people are working with young dogs this time of year. It's top of mind for a lot of folks. What is the biggest mistake you see us doing when we're working with a puppy?
Starting out with an e-collar, using an e-collar incorrectly.
Yeah.
And getting a dog turned off, not understanding how to use an e-collar, and along with that, just realizing that this is a puppy, and like a very young child, they may have a short attention span, and if they're not getting something that you're trying to do, maybe you're trying to get the dog to whoa, and the dog just isn't getting it. You need to think about what you're doing. First of all, if you're angry and getting upset, you need to stop the training.
Yeah.
It's time to stop. But if they're not getting, go back to something that they do know how to do and end your training on a positive note. But I think the direct answer to your question is just trying to move the dog ahead faster than the dog is ready to go, and getting really hard on the dog, and we tend to get frustrated and angry, and I think that's a mistake. And I also think, as I said, and I want to emphasize, incorrect of the use of the e-collar or overuse of the e-collar can be a real disaster. That can create unrepairable problems.
Yeah, that there is still a camp that thinks e-collars are about punishment, and there are any number of ways to describe the right way to use it. Why don't you summarize how you would use an electronic collar?
The electronic collar is to be used to reward correct behavior, and it is to stimulate, not to shock the dog. And so when you first put that e-collar on the dog, I think that the collar should be on the dog for a couple hours, so the dog forgets that it's there.
Yeah.
And then you may want to start out with a tone or whatever. But in any event, in adjusting the level of stimulation, and again, Michael Ellis has a very good demonstration. He's not a big fan of e-collars, but anyway, you have to be very careful. And you start at the lowest possible level with that e-collar, and you're looking for any response from the dog. It could be a twitch of an ear, the dog scratching or just a flexing of a muscle in the dog, and that's enough stimulation to get the dog's attention. And then I also have a videotape by George Hickox that where he demonstrates using the e-collar and teaching the dog how to turn the e-collar off. And it's George Hickox's videotape is called Great Beginnings, and so the e-collar becomes more a reward system than a punishment system. Anyway.
There you go.
Did that answer the question? I wandered all around there.
Of course, it just begged another question. There are many people out there who don't know what the heck a videotape is. But hey, kids, look that up. Ask your mom.
Well, it's actually a DVD. I'm sorry, it's not a video. It's a DVD.
Okay, if anybody still has a video, actually, I shouldn't say that. I probably have old TV shows of my own sitting in the shop out there. But anyway, you get the idea, everybody, and it's absolutely true. In fact, I'll just relate to you. I love my e-collar, and I use it mainly for tracking, but also for some commands. Use the tone and the vibration for some commands. But even the aversion part of that, even the stimulation you talk about, I have dialed it way back, and it works probably better than the hot button used to work back in the day when you couldn't adjust it. So I'm testimony to that as well. Phil, I want to
Could I give you a brief example?
Yeah.
Is there time?
Yeah, of course there is.
I mentioned the fact that Sunday afternoon we were having a hard time. I have a retriever trainer, which is, it fires a 22 blank and shoots a bumper out. And so at the end of our training on Sunday afternoon, my wife and I decided that we would launch some bumpers for the pup using the retriever trainer. And of course, the intent was that we would put her on a whoa and have her stand there and fire the bumper and then release her to go retrieve the bumper, hopefully to hand. Well, every time the retriever trainer was fired, she was off to the races, and my wife was trying to hold her and have the lead in a suitcase fashion, trying to hold her, but she's a very strong young dog, and it just was not working. And so we both got pretty frustrated, so we just quit. Yesterday, I went out and I had run the dog, and we were just having a great time. And I got to the end of the day, and I thought, this has been a good run today. I just wonder. So on Sunday, I did not have an e-collar on the dog. So yesterday, at the end of the run, I got the e-collar out of the truck, and I put it on the dog, violating one of my rules, which is to have the dog have the e-collar on for a couple hours so they forget that it's there. But anyway, I put it on the dog, and I took her out, and I whoaed her, and I just used the tone on the e-collar.
Yeah.
And I got my blank pistol out, and I fired a blank as I threw the bumper, and she stayed through the whole thing. And I went, aha, because Sunday I thought she doesn't understand what whoa means. And yesterday I figured out she does understand what whoa means, but she's just not ready to do that yet. So it was just, and I didn't use any stimulation. I just used the tone on the e-collar. So anyway, it was a good lesson for me that I have a little bit more work to do in getting her to comply with the whoa command.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've learned that the hard way as well. The few times my wife has helped me with another dog a few years ago, it reminded me of a title of another book that I got to read someday called The Other End of the Leash. And when you said your lead was in the suitcase position, I was thinking the same thing. We were doing much the same you were. You just hold that dog. Hold it really tight, and I'm going to loft that bumper out and pop off a starter pistol. And no matter what he does, you just keep the pressure on that lead. And of course, the dog is fighting that lead the whole time. So yeah. That's part of the process. It's complicating the whole transaction because the next day didn't have a helper, put the check cord on the ground. He was still attached to it. No pressure. Poof. All of a sudden steady to wing shot and fall. So there are a lot of ways to think about this stuff. That's why I called my first book, What the Dogs Taught Me. It sounds like they taught you a few things as well.
Yeah. Well, that you got time for another real short story?
Phil, I could talk all day, but I've certainly got time for one more.
Okay. I was hunting quail down in Arizona, down towards Sonoyta, southeast of Tucson. And it had been a long day. We were primarily looking for Mearns quail, and it had been a long day, and it was warm, as it often is in the late winter, early spring down in Arizona. Anyway, we were coming back up a canyon, kind of a draw, and there were canyons coming down into the draw that we were in. And since it was late in the day, the wind was coming down those draws. And I was walking along. I was tired. I didn't want to climb another hill. And I saw my dog pick up his head and turn, and he started up this ravine. And I thought, oh, man, Ace, I don't want to climb another hill up there. So fortunately, I had my GPS, and I could watch him on my GPS. And sure enough, he got up there 200 or 300 yards and pointed. And I went up there, and he had found a covey of Mearns quail. So what I learned from that was a little bit about the sensitivity of that dog's nose, because he got that scent from those wind currents coming down that ravine into the canyon that we were in.
Yep.
And followed it up and pointed those Mearns quail up there. So if I had not been watching him and alert to what he was doing, how he was moving his head, and how he kind of lifted his nose and went up that scent trail, I don't know. That was just a great lesson to me in terms of watching the dog and learning to trust my dog. That's one of the things. That seems to be something that I keep relearning, is trust the dog, because they know what they're doing. That's why I have them out there.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better. Phil Swain, NAVHDA judge, trainer, wild bird hunter. Guy knows his stuff. He's been around. Again, thank you for your service starting way back in the old days during that conflict, but also for all your NAVHDA judging over the many, many decades that I've been connected with you. We do all appreciate it, and we do all appreciate the wisdom you've instilled in us today. Phil Swain, thanks again for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks for the honor of participating with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The rest of you, don't go anywhere. We've got a few more things to cover that I think might be of interest to you. If you're looking to win a new shotgun, for example, I'll have an offer for you that you can't resist, as they used to say. The Upland Glossary is here with the letter H, brought to you by finebirdhuntingspots.com, where you can get the whole glossary. But first, let me talk to you a little bit about your dog's food. Let me give you a homework assignment. Read up on why your dog needs a quality mix of diverse proteins from the air, sea, and land sources. Where are you going to do that? drtims.com. Dr. Tim knows of what he speaks, and he's got it all right there in black and white, where you can understand the reasons that you need poultry, fish, and red meat sources for protein. It's all about amino acids and how they process and which ones process at what rates in what places in a dog. Learn all about it at drtims.com. And while you're there, take a 30% discount on your first order. Just use the code Upland Nation. Free delivery all the time. drtims.com. And I know we've been talking a lot about dog training this time of year, especially young dog training, but the other thing that needs training maybe is your shooting eye. My buddy Tom and I are heading for Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School in a couple months. We're going to take some lessons from the pros over there who know what they're talking about. They're located in Western Oregon, so if you're passing through the state, and a lot of you will be, park your RV at Mid-Valley Clays and take a lesson or two or shoot any of the games, skeet, trap, sporting, or 5-stand. Might want to shop some of the new shotguns as well. MidValleyClays.com. Learn all about them. Of course, you can order your new shotgun there as well. MidValleyClays.com. Learn more about them and what they have to offer. And if you're passing through, come on down and stay a while. We're up to the H in the Upland Nation Glossary. And this week, H stands for hup. If you're pointing dog guy, you might have heard it once in a while and wondered what the heck it was. If you're a flushing dog guy, I hope you know that it means, hey dog, stop and sit down and wait. Kind of like the whoa command, but for a flushing dog, particularly spaniels is where that word came from. Hup, H-U-P. Works for flushing Labradors and Chesapeake Bay Retrievers as well, any other retriever breeds. But hup is the command you use when you're still in the kind of the early stages of training. Theoretically, the dog should hup at the flush as well, and that's for safety and obedience and to impress the judges at your next spaniel field trial. Hup. And if you want the rest of the list, go to findbirdhuntingspots.com. It's all right there. And speaking of right there, I asked in a recent survey if you would take a newcomer hunting next season, and congratulations to the 52% who get a gold star for saying, of course. The 40% who said maybe may also want to listen to the 7% who said no way. That prompted the question, if you're in the no camp, I'm not judging you, but I just got to know, why wouldn't you take somebody hunting? And the comments were eye-opening, enlightening, and everything else. First off, congratulations to everybody who had the same philosophy as Jay Lawners, who said, I'm not in the no category. I take a high school student every year. Phil Stewart does the same. Philip Boswell reminds us that safety is the number one concern, and that is why he does not. Thank you, Jennifer Burdett Maxwell. Speaking of Hunter Vaughn, who's up there in the picture on that Facebook post, he's ready to come back. We had a blast too, didn't we, everybody, when we went to Flint Oak on that particular TV shoot. Troy Stark took a young deaf man hunting last season. His biggest concerns are always dog and safety issues. Slow down, be careful. And that seems to be the overriding concern. Jack Gable says, even most seasoned upland bird hunters I know don't want to join us, and I rarely invite anyone anyway. Why? It's all for the dogs, and it's all training all the time. Okay, I get that. Yeah, so, if you don't want to go, if you think somebody's expectation is shoot a lot of birds, but your expectation is to work with your dogs, got it. Tom Wheelies, I hope I said that right, Tom. He says he loves to take newbies after a good safety talk. And I'm just going to amplify that. I did a few videos. They're all at my YouTube channel as well on recruiting and introducing a newcomer to hunting. And one of the things I talk about in one of those videos, I think maybe needs to be amplified a little bit here. Our dogs are our best ambassador for hunting. Even if they don't carry a shotgun, if you have somebody who's interested in this, take them along and let them just enjoy the dog work. That might actually be a great strategy. I don't want to be underhanded about it, but, it's like, hey, man, back in the day, hey, the first one's free. If you're too young to know what that's all about, ask your dad. But anyway, use your dog as an ambassador. Let them walk along, maybe see how that all works. And hopefully you get a few birds up and dogs get a retrieve and you have a good time and you've made a convert who someday, after they are instilled with the safety ethic, will go hunting with you. And after they've been hunting a while, maybe they need some help with their hearing. Audio Cardio, our newest sponsor, asks who your hero is. And if you nominate a hero, you may just take home a new Mossberg over and under shotgun. Yeah, that's one of the prizes for somebody who nominates a hero, HEAR-OH, at my Wing Shooting USA Facebook page. There's a post pinned to the top that'll take you to the link where you can enter to win that Mossberg over and under shotgun. A mentor, spouse, friend, parent, somebody has helped you over the years with your hunting career, and maybe they need a little help with their hearing. Well, I've told you about the Audio Cardio app. It's easy, it's simple, and they could win themselves a year of that app subscription, as well as you winning that shotgun. It's all at the Wing Shooting USA Facebook page. That'll about do it here at the Upland Nation podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Phil Swain, for your wisdom, your service to all of us in the dog training and testing world. Sure appreciate it. Maybe someday we'll share a field that is not affiliated with a NAVHDA test. That would be fantastic too. Thank you to those who left ratings and reviews. I'll leave you all with this bit of wisdom from a likely source, Ann Landers. She says, don't accept your dog's admiration as conclusive evidence that you are wonderful. Couldn't agree more, Ann. Thank you for that wisdom, and thank you all for listening. I'm Scott Linden. Until we meet again next week, see you at the range.